And we are going free. Can everybody hear me okay? If you hear bird song, the birds are singing right outside the window. So that's the cause of that. I figure we'll give a few minutes for folks to show up to the stream. I've also got to kind of wake myself up. I've been watching Tutar as much as many of you have. And I feel like I've got to kind of come to now to be able to speak with you all. So hopefully we'll have a good going free stream. I've been very busy lately. I lost an entire day and a half and ended up going without a lot of sleep, and trying to prepare for this was difficult, but my commitment to you all is more meaningful to me than whether or not I have slept. We have to get this message out. We have to make sacrifices. And that sometimes means a little less sleep. That sometimes means we have to go without our favorite shows. We have to go without our favorite, especially if you're watching television, go without your favorite sports ball or whatever it is. Sometimes you just have to set those things aside, especially now as things continue to get worse and worse. Ezra Pound saying Andy Worski was boring. Well, I certainly think, hail to Sin526. I certainly think that when the subject matter, when you're showing up for a specific subject matter and it is something that is only tangentially related, that it's not astonishing, I guess, when it ends up being soporific. And I think I received a couple messages, and that's not unusual. I mean, different pleasures for different folks. And I think that, those who follow Worski, certainly to him and this Ethan Ralph, who is new to me as well, certainly to them, this whole imbroglio that they are ensnared in with this author and this I guess this person who's worn many hats, whose name was Ian. This whole imbroglio is very meaningful to them because there is a lot of character slander and people who follow these people who care about them and what they're up to. That this sort of gossip is very meaningful and very interesting. So for them, it was a very exciting show. I know for a lot of the people who were, and also of course if gaming is a very big part of your life, then the discussion about that would be meaningful. But I know for a lot of the people who were writing me about their disinterest in the show, or not their uninterest in the show, I think that those subjects had a lot less meaning. So I'm glad to see you all here. Red Pill Bulgaria writing, "Wow, Jason, you switched right away from Tutar." In fact, I'm going to be trying some new techniques, some new ideas when it comes to streaming, and I kind of did a little experiment today, and what I anticipated worked out the way I anticipated it would. So that was a positive. That was a positive thing that I guess will encourage me to keep going with the experiments. So there are some opportunities there. Ezra Pound, thank you for all that you do for our people. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you in return. Thank you for sharing that appreciation. It's very meaningful. It can get difficult without question when it comes to being on the front lines and having all of the anti-white attention aimed at you. But when I have great folks like you supporting me and are going free and are spreading this message to their friends and family, every second of it is worth it. And more importantly, for me, it has always been, and the thing that has always really just been the impetus for what I do is not. Although the white population living today is, and especially all of the hurts that are being suffered by our people, for me, a particular focus is on the white children, because they have they are not yet anti-white. They might not even be born yet, but they're going to be born into a hell that, if we don't change, will be something unimaginable, even to the terror that we experience, the persecution and oppression that we experience. So we have to fight for them. We have to ensure that our civilization, that it, as it was passed down to us, even though it was going bad by the time it was passed down to us, that it is better than it was handed to us. That's our duty. It's our obligation. And our people have suffered far more grievously and had challenges that were far more significant. And they went out and they put their lives on the line for our people and for the generations yet to come. And that's the kind of people that we have to be. That has to move us from the inside. That has to be the kind of thing that compels you to go forward, even when no one else knows that you're working for our well-being. Even when no one else will know, you won't be celebrated for it. You won't get a pat on the back for it. That's the kind of thing that still has to push you forward. If it's not a fire that's burning in you, moving you forward, then that is something that you have to kindle. In that moment, when you realize this is something I should do, no one will ever know. No one will ever celebrate me for it. There'll be no plaudits for my sacrifice. There'll be no plaudits for my efforts. That's the moment that you have to act. And there's not, for many, there's this idea that if there isn't some particular deity that is looking down on you and will know that you've made this sacrifice, that no one knows. But that's not the case. There is something more to the spirit of a people, and there's something more to, there's not. I'm not going to call it this like people who are brought back, that people who live again, reincarnation sort of ideas, but rest assured, there's something deeper and more spiritual about the human animal than some of these fairy tales, and also at the other end of the spectrum, these ideas that we're just these slabs of meat that have developed consciousness. There's something much more there that we are not even remotely close to being able to understand. So let's see how we're doing here. If you haven't already, please tweet the stream, gab it, post it to Minds, post it to Facebook, and let's get as many people in here. And we are going to get started on the subjects of white shooter, non-white shooter, Yang Gang, accelerationism. Let the people know when you tweet it and gab, when you put the message out there, that these are the subjects that we are going to be addressing. Of course, we're talking about the New Zealand shooting. We're talking about the Netherlands shooting. The other two are self-explanatory. I see that Laura said that you could hear me loud and clear. So thank you very much. A very valuable member of our community. I see Ryan here, another valuable member of our community. Thank you so much for the stream today, and everything else, of course, made my afternoon. Thank you for all of your support. Anti-Defamation League, it'd be great if you did a stream sometime on your diet and lifting regime. I'm absolutely going to do that. I want you all to be as healthy as possible. And was there yes, there was a super chat. Leo the Great super chatting with $5. I have not read the individual's manifesto. I did look at portions of it, but I probably will. If you all would like me to do a video or even a stream where I address this manifesto and I go, point for point, and we talk about maybe what's in it. If you would like me to do that, let me know. I think it's obviously relevant what he said, what his motivations were. I know there are a lot of thoughts here. I see a number 9 showing up. Let's see. What else do we have? Oh, and if you'd like to super chat, you can super chat here on YouTube, but you can also dig down into the description and find the familiar alternative that you may have been using before. I am able to see those. super chats again, and I will be able to read what you write there. So let me prepare that so that I can see. In fact, we may, let's see. Joshua Randall has already super chatted there. So let's see. Give me one moment as I stretch this out. Again, if you could please let people know what we're going to be talking about today, which is, again, the white shooter in New Zealand, the non-white shooter in the Netherlands, Yang Gang, and accelerationism. And if I could hold the cup so that you can see my good friend Way of the World's moniker there. Joshua Randall, super chatting by digging down into the description intrepidly. Thank you very much for the super chat of $10, Joshua. And finding the familiar alternative. Looking forward to this stream. Looking forward to this after suffering through low IQ Warski. I need to get back the brain cells lost. Too bad there wasn't a slaughtering of Warski Part 2. You know, when it comes to Warski, I've heard, and you all can correct me if I am wrong, but I've heard that he has changed quite a bit since that stream where I thoroughly eviscerated him and the others on that panel. He was kind of, I don't know how much of what was said there was really coming from Andy Warski. Rather, was it really just Andy following the lead of these other people? That might have been the case. They seemed, some of them just seemed, if you haven't seen this video, it's my slaughtering of Warski live. It was my Acmatic video, still is my Acmatic video. And essentially they were in this really childish way insulting this woman called Rage After Storm, who had cited some evidence to demonstrate differences in race. The race is real, in fact. And so there were these personalities on that stream that were stronger personalities than Andy's, the sort of personality that kind of can push somebody around. Andy seems like he's a little bit more amiable person. And maybe he was just more or less following their lead. So I don't know if that was really all of his opinions, or rather they were, and he changed. And then I got some messages saying that, well, he changed back. So I really don't know what's going on with him. But he is a crowd pleaser without question. I think he's got a very enormous audience. Let me see. BB writes, "You do great work, No White Guilt, and helped red pill me a Zoomer." Well, thank you very much for letting me know about that. I helped you get red pilled. And what we're going free. We're doing something more than just red pilling. Jesse Link, I became a fan around the time you made that video, or a few months later. Classic No White Guilt. Well, thank you for that. The funny thing about that video is that I was not following this ongoing debate between the skeptic community and the alt-right community. This video was just recommended to me by YouTube, and I clicked on it. I had some work to do, and it was played as I was doing some work. And when I heard these people just behaving in the typical anti-white way, where they mock and they don't have any, there's nothing of substance there. It's all about being as childish as possible and going after this girl, this team of people dogpiling her. I just couldn't take it. So I said, I'm going to quickly knock a video out. I think it's like 30 some minutes long. It took me like 45 minutes to make it. I just ran through a bunch of their comments, responded to it, and that video ended up doing really well. I guess because that debate was going on between the two communities, but I really wasn't a participant in the ongoing debate between those communities. I am a Promethean, and I see the alt-right moniker as and I've been in the white positive sphere for long before that moniker existed. So to me, because of that, it's more like a trend or a fad than it is for some of you who that's all you have known for the white positive sphere is the alt-right. And so for you, it's a much bigger thing. It's a much more meaningful thing. Chuck My Ad super chats with $2. Simply for your efforts. Thank you very much for that. Stay the course with your message. I absolutely will. I will never deviate from the cause of white well-being in my service. Amygdala writing super chat. Millennial was the first time I heard you. Classic millennial. Well, thank you for that. A lot of people came to me after appearing with Millennial Woes, a great guy. Every time I've spoken with him, he's been a real pleasure to speak to. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate you coming over. It's funny because I've said before, and I will keep saying, that I draw the best people to me. So it's almost like a testament to all of you who have just seen me somewhere and then decided, oh, I want to go partake of what No White Guilt is sharing. It's sort of like a testament to you of your character. I never attract wretched people, ever. Wretched people always despise me. Only good people are drawn to me. That's been the way my entire life. The more someone despises me, the more wretched, the more black their character, the more criminal they are, the more immoral and virtueless they are. It's an odd thing, but that's been the way it has been for my entire life. What is this? ISB? ISB? EISB? D. Oh boy, the screen is I'm gonna have to get glasses. $4.99 super chat. Thank you so much. If a cop asked you to inform him about Antifa, would you run? He even offered money. Creepy. Okay, so a police officer asked you to tell him or her about Antifa? That's peculiar. Just out of nowhere? Maybe if you could supply some more evidence or some more context, rather, about that interaction, I could comment. Dave Martell super chatting with $5. Honored to share the stage with you on House of Faust the other week. Endless love and blessings to you, brother. Happy Ostera, hail the folk. Amen to that, Dave. It was an honor to appear with you as well. And I think we're about ready to go ahead and get this thing underway. Remember, folks, if you haven't already, also thumbs up, like the stream, and ring the bell if you haven't already, because Syrup says he knows what Jason would say to the cop. What you're always supposed to say to the police if they ask you any questions. Does anybody know what I have advised you all to say if law enforcement of any type comes to you and asks you any questions? Fred is pointing out to someone that Mama JF confuses Jason with someone who tried to kill her. It appears that this most unfortunate situation with Mama JF is ongoing. She perceives that someone is currently stalking her and attempting to kill her. Of course, she is somewhere in Canada. I'm in Washington, D.C., and she has said on air that the two-dimensional version of me that you see right now is not a real person, that it is a shape-shifting ghost. And this is a very sad, just an extremely heartbreaking thing, whatever is happening with her. And I hope she can get the help that she needs. It's not a terribly, that's horrifying. Whatever she's suffering with is horrifying. And try to imagine if you were stricken with some sort of illness, that those kind of thoughts had weight, they had meaning for you. That's horrific. So I really feel for her, and I hope that she can get well. Syrup super chatting with £5. I think Jason would say to the cop, I'm familiar with Antifa. They are anti-white. Well, that would work. That would certainly be the truth, I guess. They're definitely anti-white. Well, it depends. I mean, if the police officer is your friend and off duty, I guess, and asks, that's one question. But if law enforcement ever comes to ask you a question about your involvement in white well-being or what have you, You put a big smile on your face and you say that you will happily answer all of their questions through your attorney. Could you please have their card? And then you get the card from the officer. You say this because you behave this way because, first of all, it's the truth. You'll happily speak with them through your attorney. But secondly, because everything you say is going to be taken before a DA, a psychiatrist that works for the government, or whether county or state or federal, also, or potentially before a grand jury. And you are normal people. So you want to present a very normal side of you when you are approached by law enforcement. Don't get angry with them. Don't be overly polite. Don't invite them into your home. Uh, they very well might not mean well by you, and very well might be an anti-white police officer or officers. It very well might be police officers who were ordered to find something on you. And by inviting them in the home, you're going to give them the opportunity to see things and then to comment on things, maybe things that aren't even there, that suddenly end up in the report, even though they weren't in your home. So you just big smile on your face, because we are law abiding and we respect the law, and most law officers are going to be good people. So big smile on your face. You'll happily speak with them through your attorney, but nothing beyond that. And then if the conversation must happen, have that conversation through an attorney. Kasdatic super chatting with $5. Thank you very much. Watch closely. You will see the New Zealand shooter kick the mag into vision on the ground. It wasn't there already. It dropped from his belt, and then he kicked it, is what Kasdatic one writes. I think there are. I have not looked into these ideas, these arguments that this shooting or something was a false flag. I am going to review some of that. I haven't yet, but of course, when it comes to YouTube and our anti-white friends and censors at that institution, any claim that it was a false flag or something other than the regime presents it to be is immediate grounds to censor the video. So we have to be careful when discussing the subject. And I am certainly not saying that anything other than what the regime said is what happened. We have Lunar Octopus super chatting with $4.99. First time seeing you, I think, Lunar. Hello, No White Guilt. Would you agree that exercise like weight training is good for white well-being? Absolutely. Eating properly, staying away from poisons. If you're a smoker, work on getting away from smoking. If you're a drinker, work on getting away from drinking. You're a human being, so you're going to be fallible. You're going to make mistakes. You got to be understanding of yourself when you make mistakes. When you make the error, it's not the end of your effort. It's just you acknowledge that you've made the error, and then you pick it up again and you begin moving on toward your objective. So keep that in mind. The same thing happens with working out. The same thing happens with eating right. You're going to make mistakes. When you make a mistake, you're a human being, and you go easy on yourself. You understand that it was a mistake, and yet you're going to get back on track and keep moving in the right direction. That is how you continue to improve. That's how I've continued to improve throughout the totality of my life, is by staying on objective. You have to be resolved, but you have to understand ahead of time that you're going to trip. And the reason why you have to understand that you're going to trip on your way to your objectives, whether it's losing weight, getting strong, getting ripped, building stamina, whatever it is, eating right, serving white well-being, you have to understand that you're going to make mistakes ahead of time, because you don't want those mistakes to be the reason that you quit. Does that make sense? You want to know, okay, I know I'm going to screw up at some point. And when I do, I'm going to focus on being more dedicated than I was prior to the accident, prior to the error. And I'm going to keep chugging along. I'm going to keep moving toward that objective. One foot in front of the other, folks. It took 8 years to write Born Guilty. It took 8 years. Did I get there by giving up every time that I didn't, I tried to put time, and I did, put time every single day into the book. That was my objective. No matter how sick I was, no matter anything, I put day or the research or whatever that went into it. There were days when I might only be able to do 15 minutes because I was so sick. I had the flu a couple times over those past 18 years. Did I say to myself, well, I only was able to do 15 minutes. That's all I'll ever do from here on? Or when I went out flyering and I only got maybe a quarter of the flyers that I got out. Or I was supposed to go out, but then I got lazy and I didn't go out. No, I just saw that as a weakness, that I was a human being and that I had failed, but that I would do better next time. And that's how you all can get better as well. And that's how I will continue to improve. That same philosophy, because that is how we move from A to Z. It's not from some magical, if you're going to start working out, don't get online and buy hundreds of dollars worth of the best workout gear and whatever that you think you might need. Just get started. Start doing push-ups and sit-ups. If you're a lady, do the female push-ups. If you're a guy and you can't do a regular push-up, start off with the female push-ups. No starting point is bad. Nowhere is embarrassing. The only thing that's embarrassing is to continue to sit on your ass, continue to be a slob, because then that means that thing is who you are, your character, that thing is faulty. The rest of this is just yours to do with. Your actions, what you do with your life, that's yours to do with. You're that electric storm. And so don't let that be what's faulty. So we got Ken Picks Man, $5 super chat. Go Free was amazing. Thank you for all that you do for us. Fitness video win. Well, as I drink some water, let's say we do a fitness stream before the 20th. Let's do a fitness stream at the beginning of near the beginning of next month, and then we will try to do them a little bit regularly. We'll try to do them regularly, maybe at least once a month, and we'll bring on people to talk about it. We'll talk about my diet. We'll talk about other people's diets, different types of working out. We got a question I just saw jump by, regrettably, about. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. I want to. Scott says that Vox Day thinks it was a false flag. Jelly Storm is writing, look at his pumped up arms. Of course, No White Guilt works out. Yeah, I've seen the inside of a gym a time or two. But you don't need to go to the gym. Don't run out and buy some expensive gym membership to be in shape. No White Guilt, I've heard that editing is the hardest part of writing. Was that the case for you? It absolutely is. Bill Seaver, strong advice. Thanks, No White Guilt. Thank you, Amber Yates. We appreciate what you do, Jason. Are we ready to get started on these topics? I think we got some important things to talk about. Let's see here. Editing is the hardest part because your mind knows what you want to say. Your mind knows what you wrote in your mind. And therefore, rather, when you read it, if you fail to put something down, your mind puts it there. Have you all ever seen these I guess maybe we could refer to them as puzzles, where it'll ask you to find the words that have been doubled or find the errors in a paragraph or something, and like I will be twice or and will be twice, and then or there'll be some letters missing from the word and you won't see any of it. The reason why is because your brain is actually not seeing everything that's there. You have something called the RAS, the reticular activating system in the brain. That brain filters most of the information in our world. And the reason why is that there are trillions and trillions of bits of information, and the human brain can't come close to processing all of that information. So what it does is it takes memories that you've stored, and then it looks at your environment and it takes bits of the environment as much as it thinks that you need to interpret that environment, and then it pairs it with memory, and that's what it presents to you as your reality. So when you go back to read your own work, you're filling in a lot of the gaps. That's why the longer you are away from something you've written, when you go back to it, it gets much easier to find the things that the mistakes you've made. And that's obviously why you have other people look at your work, because they won't have what you meant to say in their heads. We can talk about Raz in the future as well. We have Hey There, right? Super chats with $2. Big fan. Thought I'd show my appreciation. Well, thank you very much for that super chat of $2. Thank you all for super chatting. Koakao, don't super chatting $20 intrepidly, digging down into the description to find a familiar alternative when it comes to super chats. I introduced one of my teachers to your book Go Free through an MLA citation assignment. Let's hope I've made a good lasting impact. Well, thank you so much for that. I've had a few people now cite my work in their work at school. I'm waiting. I'm hoping somebody, well, actually, no, somebody did use it in two people, doctoral theses, one in, I think it was Greece, and then the other one's not coming to mind. Perhaps it will come back. Let's see here if there's anything I missed. If I missed anybody, let me know. If you own a home, buy some cheap iron. Indeed. Barbell and rack squat stands, 10 times better than going to an estrogen-filled Globo Homo gym. Very well written. I like that. Laurel writes, let's see what she had to say. Worked with a trainer for a while. She never had me on a machine, just free weights, lots of planks, bench, dips, etc. All of these things you can do at home. Exactly. And before I get started, again, folks, please tweet, thumbs up, so like the stream, ring the bell. Make sure that you tweet Gab, post to Facebook, post to Minds, white shooter, non-white shooter, Yang Gang, Accelerationism, and we'll knock this topic out. But I do want to mention, when it comes to working out with a trainer, because I know a lot of you are going to be considering a trainer will have at a gym, a trainer will have you do a lot of things that you won't be able to duplicate. There are two reasons for this. One is to make you think that it is something unique, that it is something you can't reproduce, and that it's therefore something you have to return to the trainer for. And the other reason is to keep you from exercises that are easily reproduced by you. In both cases, it keeps you coming back to the trainer to pay the trainer again and again and again for all of these weird things that the trainer will have you do. You'll be, I've been at the gym and I've seen these people, and it's almost like, watching a seal balancing on top of a big ball with a pin, balanced on its nose, and juggling or something at the same time. And I think, what in the hell are these trainers having these people do? But of course, the purpose of it is to get you to come back again and again, pay again and again. And I understand these people have to make money. I don't hold anything against them. But if a trainer is really going to do right by you, he or she is going to train you the kind of things that Laurel's trainer did for her, which is to show her things that she can do at home. And it doesn't have to be Cirque du Soleil to get a good workout. Kevin Savage, super chatting with £2. Thank you very much for that super chat. Didn't write anything, but very kind of you. I do see things racially, but whether you are white or non-white, murder is murder, and it's disgusting. This is no way to prove a point. Yes, murder is murder. I absolutely agree with that. We reject the harming of any innocent people, no matter what their history, race, religion, etc. We have an excellent proofreader. Do I need any help? Well, I tell you what, Unicorn, if I do, why don't you reach out to me by way of my website? Always looking for help. from those who want to serve white well-being. You'll find my contact on my website, nowhiteguilt.org. Reach out to me, and we can have a discussion. Great. So great to see so many good people here. Any thoughts before we get started? Let's see. We got Verbo Tempestus here, Spartan Warrior Queen, the intrepid Syrup, as always. DM is here. Of course, I mentioned Laurel. Scott. Good Mackie is at the Crazy Pants. Bandy. Just flying through. Jesse is here. Dirk is here. Conspiracy is here. So many good people in this community. It is so encouraging. I was talking with Vampire Squid is here. Great to see you. Will you lift with Mark Collette someday? He's been doing it for decades. And hello back to DM. Yeah, I played. I mean, we are on opposite sides of the pond, but I will happily work out with him if we are on the same side of the pond. I've been a star athlete actually my whole life, up until I guess I stopped playing sports. I played football, baseball, and basketball all the way up to high school, and played baseball in a league beyond high school. Went on to play. I had an opportunity to play minor league baseball, and then I made the unwise decision, because I was a young man, to go play college football instead of minor league baseball. I say that's unwise because I could have immediately been making money and potentially made it to the majors, which would have been very good money. But you only get the secret. Unfortunately, a lot of people who are not in sport, everyone in sports will know what I'm about to say. Everyone who have not been in sports, this will be new to, and that is this: the people who are playing in the professional level are not the only people who can play at the professional level. There are many, maybe tens of thousands more. You could replace everybody who is playing in professional baseball, professional football, professional basketball many times over with athletes that are just as good, maybe even better. That, you know, those guys are doing different jobs. And the reason why is because they weren't seen. It becomes a lottery. And the scouts, the people who go and find the talent, they're human beings and they're fallible, and they can't be everywhere. Their eyes can't be everywhere. They can only look at so many people. There's only so many minutes in a day to give an opportunity to people. And so once I had moved on to college football, there was really no going back to professional baseball. So yeah, I played sports my whole life. So like I said, in reference to Jilly Storm's comment, I've seen the inside of a gym or two. All right. Well, and this is another important thing, that all of you and myself, we all debunk one of the big anti-white stereotypes, don't we? That if you're going to serve white well-being, if you're going to care about our people, the white race, Western kind, our children, our history, white erasure, if you're going to care about our societies, if you're going to care about our countries that we are the founding stock of, that nobody else could have created, that nobody else could have sustained, that nobody else will be able to perpetuate. If you care about those things, according to the anti-whites, particularly in Hollywood, that means you've got to be ugly, unintelligent, unhealthy. It means everything disgusting. Those are all all of those thoughts they put into the worst characters in their stories. And it is for the propagandistic intent that it has, because people are consuming these stories with their defenses down. And as we have talked about, and we'll talk about again on these Going Free streams, because it is so vitally important, that your subconscious mind is the part of your brain that is governing your life for the majority of your life. Consciously, you take in information. You can consciously say that what you're watching is fiction, for example. But subconsciously, you can't. Subconsciously, when you're watching the chase scene, your pulse races. When you're watching, when the good guy is undermined by the bad guy, you're filled with rage. How do we talk about the characters we see? This is a really important topic, and we'll save an entire going free stream for it. But how do we talk? And I'm going to ask you all right now. When you watch a movie, and then we're gonna start talking about the subject we intended to talk about. When you watch a movie or a TV show, how do you, and this, I encourage you to change this. I encourage you to move forward. It's something that's difficult. Trust me. It's been difficult for me as well over the years. But how do you and your friends and family talk about the characters and their motivations? Let's see if anybody has. Let me ask you this. Like, why, I don't know, I watched so little of popular entertainment. Does anybody, okay, let's do this. Does anybody have any ideas for why Darth Vader did any of the things that he did in any of the Star Wars movies? Why did Darth Vader do anything that he did in any of the Star Wars movies? Can anybody give me an answer on that? He was forced. Dichotomized stories, good versus evil. You're kind of getting there. The Jedi, because he was black. Let's see. He was a stand-in. Okay, you all are getting really close to the bottom line. Fear of loss. Emperor. We're gonna heal you. We're gonna help you go free. He was trying to bring order to the universe. We're gonna heal you, White Knight. Does anybody see where I'm going with this? He was possessed by the Sith energy. We're gonna heal you. We're gonna help you go free. He wanted power. Taylor, we're gonna heal you. We're gonna help you go free. He was convinced of his ideals. We're gonna heal you. He did it out of love. Again, we're going to heal you. All right. This is going to seem, when I say it, it's going to seem, it's like those riddles that are tough to get. And then when you hear the answer, it's almost a letdown. But I'm going to go ahead and say it anyhow because you have to be healed. And this is how you need to look at all entertainment from now on. Darth Vader did every single thing he did because it was in the script. He did every single thing he did because it was in the script. Do you see how we talk about characters in stories as though those things are real? That is where the danger lies in entertainment. You need to be more careful about what you consume by way of entertainment than what you put in your mouth or what you take in a shot in your shoulder or on your ass. What you put into your brain is far more important than all of that. Darth Vader did what he did because it was in the script. When you hear your friends and family talking about a character in a television show or in a movie, and they say he was doing that because he was felt like he was being lied to, or she did that because she was so jealous. Step in and say, no, they did it because it was in the script. Understand entertainment for what it is. But the important thing here is to realize that subconsciously, the reason why we're saying Darth Vader did it for the power, Darth Vader did it because he wanted to bring order to the universe, we're saying that because subconsciously, the part of the brain that controls the majority of our thinking, the part of the brain that is light speed compared to the conscious brain, that brain controls our lives, and it can't tell the difference between fiction and reality. It cannot. That is how meme pathogens work. That is why they're so powerful, because that subconscious brain cannot tell the difference. This is the big secret that the anti-whites have landed upon, that the best way to convince a people of anything, to brainwash them into doing anything, is just to sow the lies, sow their anti-white narrative into entertainment. And that is how they have defeated us. And they have defeated us. Now we are going to take our destiny back. So this is not something that's about to happen. It's something that has happened, and we are going to take it all back. So let me check again. Roy Danton, I never realized this already started so early. Back in the 70s, the original Star Wars movies came out. Indeed, you can go back. I can go back, and maybe we'll do this one day. Maybe I'll set up a TV here. If I don't know if I want to put it up on the screen, but maybe we could both look at it that way. It would be interesting, something I haven't seen done before. But we can go back into movies from the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and I can show you the anti-white propaganda. It's immensely amusing for me to hear people talk about how, oh, it's been fine all the way up to here, but then suddenly it got bad. What that tells me, and should tell you, is that you have already accepted a massive amount of anti-white programming as normal. Think about that. We have no idea what it means to be a member of Western kind. We have no idea of how glorious it can be to live in Western civilization. Every one of us has already accepted a big chunk of anti-whiteism as Western civilization. And we reveal it when we say things like, it was fine all the way up until 1984, then it got bad. It was fine. No, I can, especially when I talk to folks who are much older than me, and they say, well, back when I was a child in the 40s, boy, there was none of it. And then I go and I'll find a movie and I'll come back to them and I'll say, well, what about this? Isn't this anti-white propaganda? And then it's, oh yeah, well, I guess there was. I guess it was anti-white. All right. So the question is what the producer or scriptwriter wants to tell us, putting the character in as he did. Indeed, it's all about what is in the script, what they're being told to do. Also, Coconut points out, thank you very much, that Disney movies are full of subconscious anti-white memes. Absolutely. But remember, don't ever confuse like these, I guess, how can I say, these like hidden messages. Don't ever confuse that with what's really powerful. Like the weird, like my picture on the wall there, that's not what's actually convincing you all to care about white well-being and what's healing you, right? It's the dialectics. It's what I'm sharing. So in a movie or something, when the characters walk by a scene and there's like a symbol up high or something like this, that's not what's propagandizing you. That's not what's brainwashing you. It's everything else that we talk about. So though those things might be there, that's not what's doing the work of making you and our fellow brothers and sisters anti-white. All right, so let's go ahead and get started on this. Laurel points out there's even anti-white propaganda. I can, in Little House on the Prairie and the Waltons, absolutely. It's thick. It's thick. Here's what you have to do, folks. When you look at old movies and television shows, view them from the period at which it was being delivered. Remember that anti-whiteism is incremental in its application. They can't go straight to where we are today back in 1945. They've got to work the edge of anti-whiteism for that day, and they move it another step, and they move it another step. That doesn't make those steps any less anti-white than where we are today. They're every bit as anti-white. If anything is done or said that convinces you in any way, shape, or form to surrender some strength or to expose some weakness or what have you, that is anti-white. So remember that. All right, let's get started. Looks like we've got Freedom Fighter is here, Blackwater, a lot of great people here. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start off by, remember, this is white shooter, non-white shooter, yang gang, accelerationism. First thing I'm going to do is we're going to talk about the monologue I did at the beginning of TAP last week, because it is extremely relevant still moving forward with what's happening around the world right now. So I'm going to read parts of it, and then I'm going to comment on those parts. Let's make it happen, and let's go free. I write, we reject the infliction of harm on all innocent people. That includes innocent non-white people, but it also includes the millions of our white brothers and sisters who are not only killed in terrorist attacks, but are murdered, raped, gang raped, beaten, disfigured, forced into lives of drug abuse and suicide, and psychologically and spiritually abused by anti-whites and the anti-white regime every single day across the globe. So we reject the harming of all innocent people, and that includes the millions of our people harmed by anti-whites in every way, shape, or form around this globe every single day. And we will not budge an inch from that. We are not going to give any more time to the suffering of any other group more than we will give to ourselves. We will not rend our clothing for other groups when their clothing isn't rent by them for our suffering. Our suffering comes first, just as their suffering comes first for them, and we can expect nothing else. All of those whites out there who would put the suffering of non-whites above our own suffering are sick with anti-whiteism, and they need to go free. So we reject the suffering of all groups, and that means, and that includes, rather, our group as one of the groups that is suffering. The anti-whites don't do the same. They demand from us that we pull our hair and wail on the ground every time a non-white person gets harmed, but they do not do the same for us. If it is not reciprocated, it is a scam. Does that make sense? If the anti-whites do not reciprocate, it is a scam. Let me also say, too, before we move any further into this, because I just saw flash by on the screen, happy St. Patrick's Day was last 17th, a couple days ago. And also happy spring to everyone. Finally, things are changing. It's getting a little warmer in the DC metropolitan area. I go on to say, hands are covered in blood, but it is not the hands of those who serve white well-being. Rather, it is the hands of the anti-whites who, by way of their dominance in all the power centers of society, have forced upon our once tranquil Western nations, forced against our will, a multiracial witches' cauldron, a mixing of the biospirits of different peoples, an idea that has always resulted throughout all of recorded history in cultural arms races and sanguinary balkanization. I point out that the anti-white reveals his desire to inflict harm on us by way of his reportage and conversations about this shooting in New Zealand. When a non-white terrorist murders innocent white people, the anti-white excuses, rationalizes, and defends the non-white's actions. He immediately exonerates the community from which the non-white emerged. None of that community is to be blamed for the atrocities committed by a single member or a team of members or what have you of that community. None of them are to be blamed. He immediately calls for all of the different races to come together. He demands that the white race yield more, surrender more, have more understanding and sympathy, and make greater and greater efforts to accommodate the non-white peoples. So we are asked, when we are killed, when non-white anti-whites drive their vehicles over our children and they murder our people, leave their bodies in ruins. The anti-whites don't ask, they demand of us that we do more to accommodate the anti-whites. That is the response when we are murdered by anti-whites in terrorist attacks. The anti-white, I go on and I say, the anti-white poses questions that implicate all whites as the cause of the terrorist act committed by the non-white person. The non-white terrorist is in reality the victim of white racism. How many of you have seen that before after a terrorist attack? That after the terrorist attack, after we find out that our members of our community, our mothers, brothers, fathers, sisters, uncles, nephews, nieces, that their bodies were blown to pieces, that they were shot and crying out their last breaths for their family members, that it is our fault that happened, that it is the fault of our communities that happened, because we haven't turned over enough. We haven't allowed ourselves to be erased enough. And that is why our family members are now dead on the streets. How many have witnessed that before? Holla Girl, Super Chat's $2. Thank you very much for that Super Chat, and thank you for being here. Machiavellius writes, exactly. They're victims of oppression, right? That's what they're called every time, the anti-white non-whites. They're victims of oppression. That's why they murder us, and so therefore it's our fault. That's what the anti-white says. I further state, but when a white person commits a terrorist act, the anti-white indicts all white people. Western kind is to blame for the acts of one. Every single one of us are to blame. When a white person commits a terrorist act, when a white person murders a non-white person, we are all at fault. And again, the conclusion is we have to yield more, surrender more, give up more of what we have worked so hard to create and build, and what our ancestors have created, and what is rightfully ours, what is rightfully our inheritance. 3 days after I said this, read this monologue, a major newspaper printed the headline, quote, "The Christchurch shooting should implicate all white Australians. A apology is not enough in confronting our country, and confronting our countries for racism, confronting the country's racism." That is just one example of the massive number. And I asked you all in a tweet, and I had a lot of you respond. See, Hux Deluxe pointed out, and what I did was I posted that newspaper article headline. So, and see, that's the thing. I say this, and then just a couple days later, the anti-whites prove me right. So, do I have a crystal ball? Or is this something that you all can learn and be able to predict with the exact same accuracy? There's no magic. This is a formula that I have in Going Free, a formula that you can invest time in and come to own in yourself and be able to predict these things as well with the exact same accuracy. I said exactly days ahead of what these anti-whites were going to say, and they said it. In article after article and headline after headline. Hux Deluxe tweeted in response to my tweet, per capita Muslims commit terrorist attacks 240 times more often than the so-called extreme right. There's also a question about what is extreme right that's included in that categorization. Althea Promethea, a great friend of the community, a valuable member of the community, super chatted. I don't know if I see it all here. Let's see. Upon viewing the headline, the one I was just talking about, that all white Australians are to blame for the act of someone who's actually, I guess he was from Australia, committed the crime in New Zealand. But I guess everyone in New Zealand is all whites. They are to blame as well. Upon viewing this headline, a family member repeatedly uttered, quote, "This is one person writing this. Don't care Don't care. If you looked up a Nazi publication, you would find articles saying death to all brown people. So, in other words, when a representative sample of the anti-whites, and he says this one person, this fool says this one person, when it is scores and scores of articles saying the exact same thing in so many words, that person has told us nothing about the article. That person has told us nothing about the objective reality. What has that person told us? That person has told us a lot about something, or should I say someone. Who has that person told us about? Intense guy, see the reaction to him. I think you might mean what I'm getting at. That person, that person has revealed to us everything about himself. Nothing about reality, nothing about objective fact, but he has told us everything about himself. What has he told us? What has this person told us about himself when he says only one writer or talentless typist has anti-white talentless typist has written that article without headline? And by the way, of course, you do know that none of these articles are getting out the door without editors and proofreaders and all saying that it's acceptable, that this is what we want to put into print. So it's not just one. I mean, that's stupid. But what has that person revealed about himself? Ryan, exactly right. Kate, exactly right. I don't know. Did anybody else say it? Andre, exactly right. That he is anti-white. He doesn't care how many anti-whites have said that. He just wants to dismiss the reality of the situation. He wants to get away from it as quickly as he can because he's anti-white, because he agrees with it. But he doesn't want to say that he agrees with it because it's so ugly, because the position is despicable. And he's not anti-white enough to say, yes, I want to get rid of all white people, but he's close. He's very close, but he's still such a coward. I mean, think about the cowardice there, the duplicity, the lack of character there in the heart of that person. Oh, it's just one. So then what would happen if Althea showed this individual 1,000 of these articles, which I'm sure they can be found if you were to search all of the blogs in all of the major newspapers around the world in Western civilization around the world. I'm sure there are thousands in total that have already commented saying as much, either implicitly or openly, that it is the fault of white people and they all are to be blamed. What would he say then? Would he be? He wouldn't be able to say, well, it's just those thousands of media organs that are saying it. What an anti-white bastard. So who else? We had Brave Fouché, who has returned to the white positive sphere recently. Glad to see her back. She writes, we're only white when they can pin something on us. Otherwise, we're holding on to a false identity. Exactly. I mean, when it comes to us saying, well, we want to serve white well-being, when it comes to that, they say, well, who's white? And it's all of these anti-white arguments that are intended to undermine our service to white well-being, to undermine defense of our people. But when it comes to blaming us, well, then we are a people, and steps can be taken against us. Lisa tooled for playing and wrote to me right after with this hashtag idea, exactly why I tried to start hashtag not all whites. They will always collectively blame us, while hashtag not all to excuse everyone else. Beautifully said, Lisa. That was perfectly on point. Well done. That's absolutely what they do. Immediately move to say, oh, it's not all the non-whites, and whites have to give up more, but it's all white people and whites have to give up more. Do you see how this works? Do you see how I mean, it's so comical when you see things from the point of view, from the heights, and you can look down on these ridiculous, asinine arguments of the anti-whites. Frost Forge replied, a woman I work with, a white, anti-white homosexual, lesbian, honestly believed that this person was screaming, the shooter was screaming, white power during the entire event. I asked if she actually saw the video, and of course, she said no. So she had just revealed again that she is anti-white, and that is what Frost Forge can expect from her in the future forever. So I thank you all for responding to that tweet. And in the future, if I put a tweet out like this and you respond, folks, ladies and gentlemen, I will try to get work those tweets into the conversation we're having here on Going Free. Okay, back to what I had said in my monologue. I continue, and I wrote, the anti-white immediately calls for, now this is when a white person commits a terrorist act, as we saw in New Zealand. The anti-white immediately calls for more restrictions, more censorship, more persecution, more prosecution on the speech, actions, and lives of whites in general, and specifically white people who love ourselves, our children, our history, and our destiny. So the exact opposite of what they do when anti-whites commit such atrocities, when non-white anti-whites commit such atrocities. The anti-white poses the question that again implicates whites as the cause of the terrorist act. Whites loving themselves, celebrating their heritage, and desiring to preserve their people. They are responsible for the terrorist act. The anti-white concludes that the white terrorist is in reality a representative example of Western kind. So again, the exact opposite of how the anti-white behaves when it is a non-white, anti-white terrorist. I conclude my monologue on that beginning of that tap by saying that history, both past and future, indict the anti-whites of the present for this and all such acts, because by way of silencing those who care about our people, by cutting the tongues out of our mouths through censorship and deplatforming, ostracism, expulsion, and firing, they, the anti-whites, set the stage for an eternal warning that is perfectly articulated by President Kennedy when he said, quote, those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. I finished by saying, I implore the anti-whites to let us speak. Let us receive investments. Let us bring our message of hope and love to our beleaguered brothers and sisters across the West. Because if you don't, you, not those calling for peace, such as ourselves, but you, the anti-whites, as President Kennedy articulated, are to blame for these atrocities. So now I want to get into the juxtaposition. I want to have a quick look at the chat and see what people said. Actually, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take 60 seconds, and what I want you all to do is I want you all to think of some examples of comparisons. What is the difference between the recent coverage of this shooting in New Zealand and some other atrocities? Like, how about the Manchester atrocity? There was someone who tweeted, and I wish I had it in front of me. I don't, though, but it was a fantastic tweet by, I think it was an MP in England, that's when, after Manchester, called it something like, in a tweet, an unfortunate incident, and then called what happened in New Zealand a horrific terrorist attack. What does that individual tell us about himself with that choice of words? So 60 seconds, and I will be back. And I want to know, while I'm gone, some examples of comparison. How do the anti-whites treat non-white terrorists when they commit their acts against us? and how do they treat this compared to how do they treat this latest shooting by a white guy in New Zealand. And I will be right back. Larson Dillon super chatting with $20. The NZ and Las Vegas expert shooters both had funding from completely untraceable sources. The ideal way to do it without any financial connections. Suspicious to me. Thank you very much for that super chat of $20, Larson. A valuable member of our community. I see you often, and I thank you very much for the super chats, and I thank you all for being here as we are together going free for the well-being of our people. So let's see if we have any examples. That was a Labor Party leader. That's Emaciated Grape wrote. Somebody saying, let's see. Right, they oppress people like Tommy Robinson, and then they protect the anti-whites, no matter how criminal they are toward our people. Exactly. And that's how it has to always be viewed. Remember that. We need to put ourselves at the center of our story. All right. Let's do a juxtaposition. Most of you will have not heard of the non-white shooter and the people murdered by him in the Netherlands 2 days ago. Has anybody heard about that shooting 2 days ago? Or let me rephrase this. Any of you hearing about it for the first time? So it's Psych writing, the media calls for solidarity and unification under diversity, and that not all non-whites are like this, but condemn white advocates for all types as evil and racist. Exactly. Very well stated. That's exactly what they do. They always call for this when it's a non-white terrorist that murders us. They call for this unifying and for this demand for us to surrender more and to understand the non-whites more. Why haven't we changed more of our city names and our street names and torn down more of our statues for them so that they can feel more comfortable? Remember what I said about feeling comfortable. Non-whites have different biospirits from us. Every race has its own biospirit, and you can understand that crudely as instinct. You only feel comfortable when your biospirit is reflected back at you from your environment. That is why you have a cultural arms race where you have numerous groups of people who all have what I refer to as numerical courage, where they're all feeling strong enough as a people to project who and what they are internally. Because once you have that environment, you have people who are uncomfortable. All of them are uncomfortable as a result. And then they all get hostile toward each other as a result. It has happened every single time like this throughout all of recorded history. This is the human animal. If you want a different outcome, you need a different species. So why do people continue to buy this nonsense? There's no such thing as multiculturalism. It cannot happen. Intense guy. Just imagine if a gang of whites were gang raping some minority girls on an industrial scale, compared to how they covered up the ongoing events of that nature with the colors switched. Exactly. Exact. You could not, you couldn't be awake for a moment without hearing it come through the radio, television, news broadcast over sirens that whites had rape gangs that were grooming young non-white girls. For God's sake, you can't even fathom what the anti-whites would do in the regime's media with that. For God's sake, just imagine that. Very well stated. So has anybody heard, is anybody hearing about the shooting by a non-white and the murdering of 3 people? May Shaded Grape has heard of it. Says El Ronder says a terror attack a few hours ago in Italy. Please do it right now. It's breaking news. Give us your take. So there was a terror attack in Italy, you say. We can have a look at that and see what's going on. Let's see. Wrong attack. Does it have, is there a spot in Italy? Looks like I'm pulling up everything but the current attack. If you can give me some more info, I will definitely have a look at it. Bus driver set a bus on fire with children in it. Wow. Let's see. Let's see. There must be some kind of software to prevent all of these ads from jumping up on the screen. You all know of it, let me know. Tied their hands. They're not calling it a terror attack. That's why it's not coming up. Ah, yes. Police driver abducted students, set bus. The police said that a driver abducted students, set bus ablaze. Bus driver in northern Italy abducted 51 children and their chaperones on Wednesday, threatening them during a 40-minute ordeal before setting the vehicle on fire when he was stopped by a police blockade. My God. Officers broke the windows of the bus and got all of the passengers to safety, thank God, before the flames destroyed the vehicle. Is this what you all are reading, that everyone survived? I hope that's the case. And of course, saying that they survived, I mean, this is something that we need to point out. would the anti-whites, if this were a bus full of brown people, a bus full of non-whites, and it had been a white guy who had abducted the bus and set it on fire, would the anti-white news sources, would they be saying, oh, everybody was pulled out to safety, no worries? Would they be classifying it like that? Oh, I see Poseidon is here. Good to see you. Zed Dez is here. Good to see you. The great Poseidon. Of course, I thought I saw Spartan Warrior Queen when I was in the middle of talking. If she's here, hello to you again. So yes, exactly, Andre. No, they would not have made it seem like everybody's fine, nothing to see here. No, they would be going into the emotional trauma experienced by the passengers on that bus. If the passengers had been non-white and the attacker white, they first of all, they wouldn't be saying nothing to see here. They were all pulled to safety. It's fine. They would be talking about the racism that attacks on the children, the evil of the white race. It would be going on and on about that, wouldn't they? Wouldn't that be what the anti-whites would be doing? Then they would be talking about whatever injuries were inflicted, and they would be speculating, wouldn't they, on the injuries? They would be saying, surely they must have concussions. They must have scrapes and scratches. They must be psychologically traumatized by this. This may be a lifetime of healing for them, all because of the evils of the white race. Wouldn't that be what the anti-whites would be writing here instead of, oh, everybody was pulled to safety? It's nothing else to see. Move along. This is a great example, and thank you for mentioning it, that this was taking place. I see Philosophicat here. Good to see you. Or Philosophicat. I'll just call you Cat. Mark Davis is here. Great to see you as well, brother. Let's tweet. Let's gab this. Let's Facebook it. Let's put it on minds. Let's get it out there to people. We need this message of healing and renewal. We need people to hear what we're talking about right now. That this happened today in Italy, and we're trying to get the information. Maybe some of you can help me get the information. The person who grabbed, the person who abducted, I guess they're saying they abducted the children. Were they already on the bus, or did they get them on the bus? I'm not sure if it's a hijacking or if it was an abduction and then they went to a bus. I guess it doesn't matter. What matters here is that we need to know, was the driver, or was this individual non-white and the people abducted predominantly white or all white? Who knows? He said, okay, some are saying he was the bus driver, a diversity hire. So he was non-white. He was a black Muslim. I'm seeing somebody right. We have a super chat by way of the alternative option for super chatting, which you can find down in the description, by Red Fox, super chatting with $10. Thank you so very much for that, Red Fox. First time seeing you here. Thank you very much for the super chat. I believe it is the first time. Brendan says, hail, brother Jason. Hail in return. Poseidon looks like he's pulling some information on the location. Spartan Warrior Queen, he was a child molester driver who wanted to set the children on fire. My God. Well, this is just the kind of thing that happens in a multiracial society. You got to get used to it, right? Isn't that what the Muslim mayor said of London? He was employed as a bus driver. I'm guessing that the children on the bus and the chaperones were not Muslims. Why is it that we are not hearing that this is not big news? Why is it? Thank you. It is a nice mug. My good friend. My good friend. Always makes the coffee taste better. So the question is, why is this not huge news? Why is the shooting and the murder of 3 innocent people in the Netherlands not big news? What do we call that type of crime? Can anyone remember? Stream before last. What kind of crime is that? Why is it not? What's the name of it? And why is it not being propagated? Sykes, thumbs up to your diligent and honest work, Jason. I encourage everyone to like this video. Thank you very much for that. Indeed, we need that to make it go out and go viral to the masses. Especially watch how the media tries to blame Salvini for the attack. And you watch the absolute well said. You know they will. Roy Danton, right? Krigsgeld, hush crime. Both of you, absolutely. It is a hush crime. Laurel, hush crime. Scott Smith, it's a hush crime. Absolutely. It is a hush crime. When something is a hush crime, it gets categorized thus because it what? Because it undermines the anti-white narrative. That is why they don't want you to know about it, because it undermines the anti-white narrative. The children were all white. The screen just jumped. Somebody wrote the children was all white. The children were all white. Hush crimes. Yep. All hush crimes. They don't want, the anti-whites don't want you all to know. They don't want the broad masses of the white middle class to know that reality contradicts the anti-white narrative. And that is why these things are hush crimes. A hush crime means that it is being quarantined. They want to keep it to as narrow a spectrum of the population as possible, as local as possible. They don't want it to go viral. In the past, 10 years ago, 5 years ago even, you would be able to grab that headline, put it on Facebook, and then all of your friends would know about it. And that was really undermining the anti-white narrative. And then what did the anti-whites do? They implemented algorithms to prevent such stories from you copying and pasting them from reaching people in your circles of influence. Again, revealing that these bastards are anti-white and that they know they're anti-white. They know what they're doing. They know that they're consciously keeping this anti-white narrative lie alive because they know they have to keep it alive to arrive at their anti-white conclusions, which is to inflict harm on you and me and our loved ones and our friends and Western civilization, our Western civilization. They know exactly what they're doing. You need to know your victimizer for who they are. Don't let them get away with these fair sounding and redolent smelling pretexts. Don't let them get away with these pretexts. Know them for who and what they are. This is the devil standing in front of you. The people who are making the decision to not let you know about what happened in the Netherlands, the people who are making the decision to not let you know about what just happened in Italy, they are devils when seen from our perspective, because they mean nothing but harm to you and your loved ones. Thought I saw a super chat, but the screen jumped again. YouTube is endless. And it's just, I'm not going to let them get to me. The screen jumping around. Who else does this happen to? I must be sharing something with you that's of value. Who else do they do this to? The police are investigating the crime in the Netherlands as an act of terrorism. But what are all the anti-whites writing in the newspapers? What are they putting on the internet? They're not saying The police are investigating this as an act of terrorism. The police have found no connection between the attacker and his victims. No, what the police are saying is still, or I mean, not the police, but the reporters are saying is still the cause is unknown. The reason for this is unknown. You can find that all over the internet. I looked this morning. The reason is unknown. The reason is unclear. Again, in support of the anti-white narrative. Now, if a white guy had gone on to the train in the Netherlands and shot dead a couple of non-white people and then fled, and the police said, we're investigating this as an act of terrorism, what do you think the regime's media would be saying? Right. Family dispute. That's what I saw. Yeah, they cover up all of the mass rapes committed by the anti-white or non-white anti-whites. Yeah, let's use we could use the hashtag hush crime and everybody tweet it out. Is that what was super chatted? I think that would be a great uh, hashtag for what happened in Italy, what happened in the Netherlands, their hush crimes. Newton says it's an act of war. I think probably particularly the raping, the mass rape gangs of our women. Some of the conclusions that the anti-whites draw. Let's get into that. Uh, we have all white people are guilty. We talked about that. All non-whites are not responsible when a non-white anti-white commits an act of terrorism. What else do we see? We see the anti-whites demand to abolish the right to self-defense. That has gone into full swing in the US and elsewhere after the New Zealand shooter. We have to abolish the right to self-defense. And let's get this straight about this whole gun thing. It's not about a right to bear arms. The right to bear arms is a right to self-defense. You have the right to defend yourself. In that age, when they wrote that sentence, that was the most powerful means by which someone could defend themselves. It was the equalizer, right? So they were saying, you have the right to self defense. You have the right to use whatever means you have at your availability, which includes the most powerful means at your availability, which was the firearm, to defend yourself. So don't get sucked into these conversations about restrictions on guns, and that's not the issue at all. What the anti-whites are trying to ban and abolish is the right to self-defense. When you look at Australia, these people, the right to self-defense is utterly been eviscerated. It has been extirpated from from what is the rights of the people, what you should be born with, what a legitimate leadership of your people in that country, what they should automatically say belongs to the people upon birth is the right to self-defense. In New Zealand, I read, and I don't know, you could correct me if this is true or not, but in New Zealand, I read that to get a firearm, you have to get a license from law enforcement. You have to give them reasons, something like this. And it said that you could not say self-defense was a reason for possessing the firearm. I mean, how loony is that? How crazy are those people that you can't acquire this tool for the purpose of defending yourself? You just have to surrender to the anti-whites. You just have to surrender to them and anyone who wants to hurt you. So when you have a white shooter in New Zealand you have the demands to abolish the right to self-defense. When you have a non-white terrorist, we have demands to expand protections for non-whites. How many of you have heard that? After a non-white has committed a terrorist attack and murdered who knows how many numbers of our people, have you heard the anti-whites demand more protections for non-whites? How many times have you heard the anti-whites in the media say the real victims are that non-white community, because now people are going to think negative things about that community? The victims are not the white race who have been maybe mowed down in the terrorist attack. No, the victims are the non-whites who will have some ugly things thought about them as a response. So we see demands for more protections for non-whites rather than less, as we see in the case for white people. And those protections take the form of preferential treatment and special privileges for non-whites. We also see, after the shooting by a white person, as we see in New Zealand, demand to abolish the freedom of speech for everybody who cares about white well-being. So freedom of speech needs to be abolished after a white person commits an act like you saw in New Zealand, but not when a non-white terrorist commits such an act. In fact, we see when a non-white does, the anti-whites demand to expand the freedom of speech of non-whites. And they do this by forcing us, white people, Western kind, to hear the demands of non-white peoples and then to placate them in those demands. Okay, Scott asked, what can we do about this? Well, we're going to get to that, I guess, in part by getting into why there are white shooters. Another thing that's important I do want to mention, though, is that when there aren't these attacks, when you don't have somebody shooting like you did in New Zealand, the anti-whites will seek to advance their anti-white agenda by saying, we need to start a conversation on X. We need to start a public conversation on X. And what they really mean by that is we need to create the impression that there is public support for these anti-white policies that we already have in place to implement. Again, revealing to the world, revealing to those who are astute enough, like you all, to see that the anti-whites fear the white middle class. That's why they continue to propagandize them. They would just implement these anti-white policies if they didn't fear their power, if they didn't fear their retribution. Because as soon as that white middle class realizes that there is no law and order, that there is that they're playing no role in the government of their countries, as soon as they realize that, then there's trouble for the anti-whites. As soon as that broad white middle class realizes that the anti-whites tyrannically control our governments, our medias, that they dominate all of these things, as soon as they realize that, our media rather, as soon as they realize that, then they will realize that they have no avenue. And that's what we're going to get into next, because it is critically important to our discussion. Intense Guy says they're always concerned about the reactions from whites after a non-white terrorist attack, but never reactions from non-whites after a white terror attack. Exactly. That if you want something to be white-pilled about, if you want something to feel positive about, it's this. The anti-whites continue with the propaganda because they have to. Because they have to. There's an audience that the anti-white knows that he has to placate, and that if he doesn't placate them, if he doesn't keep them brainwashed and dizzy, that the command and control of all things by anti-whites is over like that. That should be white pilling to everyone, because that means there are people we can get to. That means that there's a force greater than the force that is behind anti-whiteism. Because trust me, when the day comes, if the day ever were to come in any of our countries, where the anti-whites so utterly controlled and dominated that they didn't have to fear the white middle class anymore, they would stop with the propaganda. They would stop with all of these convoluted arguments. They would stop with all of these handling one situation one way and handling the other situation a different way. They would just implement everything that they want to do. The fact that they continue to propagandize you tells you that there is a force out there. It's that white middle class that they still have to fear, because that is a force greater than they are. It's like, just imagine a child, two children, one lying to the parent and one telling the truth. And the one that's lying knows that the parent is stronger, that the parent can inflict injury, that the parent can punish the lying child. So that lying child has to work overtime to keep the parent fooled about what's going on. That is exactly what's happening with the anti-whites. That parent in that metaphor is represented by the white middle class. And if we get to them and we open their eyes, everything changes. The context changes. And it changes not in one you have to get so many percent of them. It changes by contexts incrementally. Opportunities arise. There isn't one big, like 100 years till this or 50 years till that. We have no idea what's possible in the next context. So there's no reason to get depressed, no reason to be saturnine about our current state. There's every reason to be excited and to get out there and get to people who will hear your arguments, who will hear these dialectics, and then can pass it on to those who will hear from them. Every reason to be excited for that. So why was there a white shooter? Here's where the anti-whites are really going to go crazy with this stream. Psych, do you see a realistic chance that our nations gain back their political power and peaceful repatriation of non-whites to their own homelands within the foreseeable future? I see that what I can guarantee is there will be new contexts in our lifetimes that we will not have seen coming before they're here. We might be able to vaguely describe them. And when those contexts arrive, though, there will be opportunities that we absolutely cannot foresee for our well-being. And we will be positioned by way of things like this, by way of these dialectics and lexicon, to take advantage of those opportunities. So there is no forecasting of human ingenuity, particularly the ingenuity of Western kind. There is no forecasting. There is no model that can say it will turn out this way or that way. We work toward a new context. And when we arrive there, we take advantages of the opportunities presented by that context. It could happen overnight in a historical time frame that we are able to recapture our destinies. And what that looks like is something that we'll see when it arrives. If you haven't liked the stream, please do. If you have not tweeted, gabbed it, posted it to Facebook and Minds, please do. Ryan Manley says, and once you have anti-whites that fully take over, they'll call rape and murder robberies gone wrong. We see that in Rhodesia. We see that in South Africa. They won't bother. Well, even once there is no resistance whatsoever, and when you have something like South Africa, the reason why they still bother to say robbery gone wrong is that you still have countries like the U.S. where you have a broad white middle class that if the United States government was just supporting a regime that was, say, celebrating the rape and murder of whites, that would be eye-opening for the white middle class in the US. So that's why they bother with even saying gone wrong. And to a lesser degree, because you still have a white population there, that if the anti-white regime in South Africa started saying, so what if they're raped and murdered, it's worthy of celebration, that white population would wake up and things would change, context would change. So let's see. Why was there a white shooter? Does anybody have some, what was that? Something about thunder and lightning cracked when I just said something? Wouldn't be the first time. Your statement for being prepared for change sounds propertarian. I don't know the whole propertarian doctrine. When it came to propertarianism, I was speaking to the conflation. Others have come to me since then and said that not all propertarians believe in civil war being a good thing, and that there is a distinct line between those who want and believe in civil war and those who follow a propertarian ideology. When it comes to, I guess, plans for success, I have always been saying that we take advantage of all the opportunities that are presented to us and we move from one context to the next. When I hear the thinkers of propertarianism, they talk about one fail swoop of an event, and then suddenly we are in charge, and we're going to briefly speak to how that's not going to be likely or possible. So does anybody have an idea of why was a white shooter, whether you believe one was there or not? Why are there white shooters, or could be white shooters? All right. There are millions of whites, particularly white men, who are suffering, and they're silenced, and they are furious right now. Anti-white society inflicts endless misery on whites, particularly white males. Whites are marginalized, particularly white males, demonized, disempowered, and silenced. Millions of people marginalized, demonized, disempowered, and silenced. Every avenue to address the harm inflicted on them is denied by way of deplatforming, criminalizing, but also by way of trivializing and mocking their suffering. They're given no reprieve, and the attack is endless on their lives. It is endless. It is relentless. Many of them, as a result, feel that there is no reason to live. You remember the Sky King. He said that he would never be made a pilot because he's a white guy. Millions of white males unable to find a wife who will respect them, unable to get a job that they deserve, unable to get into the school that they've worked to get into, unable to get the promotion that they worked for, given no dignity, and forced to pretend that the reverse is true. Think of the psychological damage that does to a person. You are discriminated against. You are persecuted. It is written in law. It is written in the law of counties, states, the federal government, that persecution is legal of you and your community. It is written in the codes. It is celebrated at companies. It is celebrated at universities that you are discriminated against. It is celebrated in the media empires that you are discriminated against. And yet you have to pretend that the reverse is true, that you are the one with privilege, that you are the one who has all of the advantages, that you are the one who needs to surrender more. You need to give up more of your culture. You need to suffer more pain because everything is good for you in this world. You have to pretend that, because if you don't pretend that, you are more evil than you were when we started this conversation. You are worse than when we started the conversation. What does that do to the psychology of an individual? That could make anybody go mad. That could make anyone go insane. To see the reality, the cognitive dissonance of the reality, that it is law of the land and code of the company and the university that you can be discriminated against, and that it is celebrated in our media that that discrimination is a positive thing, and yet you have to pretend that the reverse is true. You have to pretend that it is all of the non-whites who are receiving the special privileges and the preferential treatment in every sphere of life. You have to pretend that they are the ones that are suffering because of you, and that you have to give up more because of that. What do you think that does to a person's mental state? What about a person who's already not well? What do you think that's going to do to them? Well, what it does is that whites, particularly white males, end up turning inward on themselves, and most of them commit suicide. The fastest growing rate of suicide is white males. No one is asking these questions. What could drive somebody like the shooter in New Zealand or anywhere else to do that, to commit such an atrocity? Well, it's all of what I just said, plus the fact that every single avenue to redress this harm is cut off for you. There is no media avenue for you to share the hurt that you're suffering, the pain that you're experiencing. There is no political avenue for you to enact any change or for you to work for change that will better your situation. When you get online, when you try to do the things that we're doing, when you try to spread this message, when you try to talk about the suffering that's happening for our people, that our people are experiencing, the discrimination and the persecution, the anti-whites cut off your means of funding those efforts. They cut off your efforts of getting that message out to the masses to effectuate change. So they put you in this position where you are persecuted, where you have to pretend that the reverse is true and that your group is actually riding high and that everyone else is suffering. And that even though you're the one who's being persecuted, even though you live in a house that's smaller and that you're renting than your parents and then your grandparents owned, and that you have a car that's cheaper and more run down, and that the non-whites who are receiving the special privileges and preferential treatments at your universities, at your work, that they have the nicer cars now, that they live in the bigger houses now. You have to pretend that they're the persecuted ones. At the same time, while you're suffering that, you are mocked and you're suffering trivialized when you try to express it. You are deplatformed. Your attempts at rectifying the situation are criminalized. Your speech is criminalized. Your right to self-defense is criminalized. You isolate these people. That's what the anti-whites do. They isolate us into smaller and smaller groups where we are terrified to share our socio-political views because of the persecution that is real, despite what we have to pretend otherwise. So you cut off every means. This is what the anti-whites have done. They have cut off every single means to redress the harm that is inflicted on us. And then they mock us and they deplatform us and they cut off the funding every time we make an effort anywhere we go. It is an endless cat and mouse game. And then they're going to be surprised that someone snaps. God help us that there hasn't been 1,000 more that have already snapped. God help us that next month doesn't see 1,000 more after that. How peaceful of a people have we demonstrated ourselves to be? What other people would sit so placidly, would endure so much as to have their voices ripped out of their necks and not go wild on society. Instead, they sit in their homes, our white brothers and sisters, using more and more drugs, inflicting injuries on themselves rather than on society. No, if anything, we should be talking about how noble of a people we are, how virtuous we are, that even as lost as our people see themselves, even though every avenue to redress all of these hurts has been cut off to us by the anti-whites, rather than harm society like the rest of the races do, the majority of us, almost everyone, kills themselves rather than harm someone else. That is the reality of the kind of people we are, that we care so much for the lives of others that we would either kill ourselves, either quickly with a bullet or slow with drugs, than harm other human beings. And yet these anti-white bastards want to talk about one person here snapping off and one person there snapping off. If this were any other race, it would be thousands. And I can think of a couple races of which it would be tens of thousands. Instead, we harm ourselves. What a tragedy. A people so glorious, that cares so much for humanity, that cares so much for the tears of the other races, that cares so much for the wailings of other peoples, that thinks so much of the family members who won't be able to hug their loved ones again, that we don't turn out every single time and harm those peoples. We care more about their family members and the misery that they feel than we care about our own family members when we commit quick or slow suicide upon ourselves. That, my friends, is a glorious people. I can think of nothing. I can think of nothing more beautiful to write down in the history books of a people than to say they cared about the suffering of everyone else, harming themselves over and over and over again for the well-being of the non-white groups for as long as they could take it. And only then did they turn outward. I beg the anti-whites, for now, put an end to this anti-whiteism. Let us and our peaceful voices reach our people with this message of hope and love for white well-being. Don't cause any more of these atrocities. If you put us in these blackest state of depression and give us no way out, shut off every avenue of political change, of the policy change in companies and at universities, and so demonize us that polls show that nearly 100% of us are terrified to share our objections to anti-whiteism. And then you deplatform us, cut off our means of funding. You give many of our members no choice but to harm themselves for now. And those who are not so well to commit these atrocities. You hold their hands throughout the totality. Super chat from Alan. Super chatting with $10. Thank you very much for that, Alan. That super chat. This is why, and this is where we're going to be wrapping up, folks. David G. writes, "The silence is almost as powerful as when you speak." Healing Arts, many clapping hands. Thank you for that. Right. Elron says, but we need them to enrich us. Yes, indeed. Surely. This is why, ladies and gentlemen, you all might be thinking this. There are many who are thinking this now. They're turning to this embracing of yang, gang, and accelerationism. And here I'm not talking about here I'm not talking about UBI. I will actually be having that conversation with Josh Neal on his show, No Apologies, on this coming Monday. We'll be talking about UBI. Right now, I'm talking about people turning to Yang Gang for this concept of accelerationism. Have any of you been thinking that all of the means, all of the avenues are gone, and we might as well hurry this along so that we can get to anarchy, and somehow in anarchy regain our destiny? Have any of you been thinking that? I know many have. You can be open here. You can be vulnerable here. I see Unmarked says yes. Phoenix Fire says nope. Spacey Tracy, yep. Yes, I decided this, Intense Guy says. Natural Order says yes. A lot of yeses and yeps. Accelerationism. We've been failed again with Trump. We know the anti-whites have cut off all of the political means of redress. People who are conservatives, people who are Republicans, who care about white well-being, they haven't realized this yet, but they, like you have, sociopolitically matured. They will come to the realization that there's no hope for political change. There's no hope to get funding by any easy means. There's no hope for any of that. The anti-whites destroy every effort at its root to oppose them. Everything and more that I said a moment ago. So I understand the desire of accelerationism. I understand the desire to embrace Yang Gang and to vote for the worst possible politicians because you think it will hurry things along to a collapse. Especially if you're a young white man, I understand it. I mean, I should be a guy. There was a guy in the white positive sphere years ago who made a brilliant point that, and his name was Dietrich. He made a brilliant point that if society was, if society was ours, if it was in our hands, our best white men would be the leaders of our communities. Instead, our best white men are working in the lowliest jobs if they can get them. Instead, they're working underneath some diversity hire and doing everything they can to not be outed as competent, doing everything they can just to get along, as anti-white as they can just to get along, as they watch their non-white peers buy increasingly expensive homes and vehicles, boats, as they watch them get promotions while the workload is shunted off on to the white guys and women in many cases. So we're not leading our communities. None of these cases of white faces being at the head of anything is somebody who cares about white well-being. So I understand the desire to want to accelerate. And just to define, again, accelerationism is the voting for candidates and also the turning of different communities, or the fueling, the billowing of the divisions and animosities between different communities to get them at each other quicker, you think, than they otherwise would be. I am against UBI. But the question is, will accelerationism work? And we're going to be wrapping up with this question on accelerationism. Will it work? Does anybody have any ideas? And if so, how will it work? I see that we have a super chat from Luke on our alternative method by which you can super chat. Digging down into the description, you will find that familiar source. Luke is super chatting $20. Thank you very much. And super chats, thank you for such passion and concern for our folks. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the support, Luke. There aren't enough thank yous for all that you're doing. Thank you so much, brother. Chaos will never be the answer to anything, Epic writes. Accelerationism will cause a sour taste in the air. No, just look at South America. Okay, I see some people getting this. I will tell you my metaphor for accelerationism in our current state. Accelerationism is a white person, man or woman, doesn't matter, standing on a platform for a train to come. And they work their job, and there's water running through the pipes of their home and electricity through the wires. And so while they're there, they can continue to survive, and they have one act in them, one act of madness in this particular metaphor, one act of terrorism in this particular metaphor. They can't step out into this void because they can't earn their living. They can't put food in their belly. They have to stay on the platform. And then as the train approaches, they take that step. And that's it. It's over. But the train keeps chugging along. The regime keeps moving. Your body isn't going to derail the train. Your act isn't going to put an end to the regime. It doesn't matter how big you make it. There aren't enough bodies that can act together that can make that happen. The other metaphor for accelerationism is a bluff. Really lies in a bluff. There's a gun on the table. It's the vote that's coming up. And the accelerationist says, I'm going to do it. I'm going to grab that pistol and I'm going to end it all. I'm going to make that vote happen. But when the day comes, when the vote is supposed to happen, and if you don't grab that gun, it disappears. Those accelerationists, the vast majority, are not going to pick the gun up. When that moment of suicide comes, when they say, I'm going to vote to make everything worse, to not be able to get the meds that that person might need, or their mother might need, or maybe their son who has seizures might need, they're not going to make that vote. This is the threat of someone who is desperate. And I understand that desperation. I feel it too when all the avenues are cut off. But no significant numbers are going to vote for that horror to be visited upon our people. your loved ones. And the main reason why is that accelerationism can't work if there isn't an oppositional entity. What you are doing, back to my metaphor about the train, is you're stepping out into that void, hoping that the train will get derailed, just hoping that some entity will come into being and that somehow, for some reason, that entity will serve our well-being. Hope is not a plan. Hope is not a strategy. I know you're desperate, but you need to take that energy and you need to invest it in things that work. You need to invest it in these dialectics. You need to invest it in this lexicon, and you need to sell it to as many white people a day as you can. That's what you have to do with that energy. It's not enough to hope that things will get worse. For Christ's sake, you know the regime isn't going to allow some socialist politician to ruin everything so that it crumbles overnight. They could drag this out for 500 years until we are nothing. You could vote these most insane communist socialists into office, and the real power holders behind the scenes are not going to allow this to crumble because it is their empire. They will drag this out for decade after decade, century after century, until there isn't life and breath and heartbeat in Western kind anymore. It's not going to fall like that. You need an oppositional entity. So you're going to ask, and this is where we will be ending the stream. I will leave you with this to think. Where does the oppositional entity come from? What is the heartbeat of an oppositional entity? There are two things. Two things are the spirit and heartbeat of an oppositional entity. Does anybody know what they are? Here's the secret. And I want you all to take this. I want you to own this. And then I want you to share this. And I don't want you to back off. I don't want you to allow anyone to cause you to self-censor. I don't want you to allow anyone to push you around. This is the heartbeat behind an oppositional entity, or any entity for that matter. It is in a world where currency is exchanged for goods and services. It is dollars on one end. Who has the dollars? The anti-whites have the dollars. They print the currencies. They have the major NGOs across the land. Everywhere you look, their wealth is prevalent. And with that wealth, they buy mercenaries by the thousands. If you could make this accelerationism happen next year, the year after, 10 years from now, you know what would happen? Those organizational entities with that wealth would crush you. They would take every last freedom that you have. Things would be infinitely worse. You would cry under their heels of their boots and beg for the days of today. Beg for how good it was today. If society crumbled, theirs would be the institutions that would harness the power of military might. Theirs would be the institutions that would move great entities, great mobilizations of people against us. You wouldn't have a chance. You would cry like babies for what we have today. So what's the alternative? The alternative then, the only other heartbeat for an organizational entity is ideology, something that moves you from within, an idea to which you, of your own volition, pledge your life. And there is nothing more worthy of your life than the cause and the blood that brought you into this world. Nothing is more worthy of your life. They have the wealth. We can have the ideology. You train people with these dialectics and this lexicon, and they will pledge their lives to this. Once we have that organizational entity, everything I've been saying about accelerationism and civil war disappears. The context will have changed. Let's get to work on that ideology, folks. Let's get to work on pledging our lives to the only thing that's worthy of your life, the people from which you come. Let's go free.